Next on Special Report, a scientific report suggests higher mileage standards for SUVs could cost money and lives. Congress nears pre-recessed gridlock. The Bush FBI nominee says he's got a lot of work to do, and D.C. cops still nowhere on Chandra. First other headline.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lori Dew. A young shark attack victim is beginning physical therapy in Florida today. Therapists have begun moving Jesse Arbogast's limbs, even though he is still in a light coma. The 8-year-old's arm had to be reattached after a bull shark ripped it off earlier this month. In Wyoming, firefighters are getting a little help from Mother Nature in the form of cooler air and lighter winds. Headway is being made. About half of the people forced from their homes near Jackson are being allowed to return. And for the first time in about a week, the spectacular Grand Tetons are clearly visible. Well, no big profit news, no big market moves. Stocks drifted lower after a trio of Wall Street forecasters cut their outlook for corporate profits. That is the latest setback for investors who were banking on a market rebound. The Dow dropped about 15 points to close at 10,401, and the Nasdaq slipped more than 11 to close at 2017. And finally, for all of you out there who thought Santa Claus just spent the summer vacationing in the Cayman Islands with Mrs. Claus, you better guess again. Santa and a few of his helpers were recently spotted in Southern California making plans for the upcoming Christmas season. Never too early to start planning. Our next update will be at the bottom of the hour. Now stay tuned for Special Report with Brit Hume. Coming up, D.C. cops get ready to call it quits in the Chandra Levy case. Brit will have the latest from Washington. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Washington. I'm Brit Hume. For more than 25 years, the federal government has set fuel efficiency standards for vehicles, an effort stemming from the long lines at the gas pumps during the oil crisis. Now, as the White House considers whether to raise that standard, a study has been released showing automakers could make vehicles 25 to 30% more efficient in a matter of years. But as senior White House correspondent Jim Angle tells us, experts say such a decision would have serious costs.
A scientific panel is telling Congress and the White House that the government could force the auto industry to make cars and trucks that get better gas mileage, but not without trade-offs.
The best things in life may be free, but improvements in fuel economy are not.
The National Academy of Sciences panel made no recommendation on what the new standard should be, but said it is technologically feasible to make cars, trucks, and sport utility vehicles 25 to 30% more efficient over the next 10 to 13 years. But consumers might have to pay.
The cost of implementing these technologies could range from a couple of $100s in certain cases to as much as $1,300 or $1,400 or $1,500 per vehicle in other cases.
The fuel standards, first imposed in 1975, required an automaker's cars to get a little more than 27 miles per gallon, light trucks and sport utility vehicles a little more than 20 miles per gallon. In order to increase average mileage, the industry made some cars smaller, and the panel says that costs lives.
Annual motor vehicle fatality rates by 1993 were 1,300 to 2,600 per year more than would have been the case if the fleet was not downsized.
The White House, which is looking for ways to increase energy efficiency, will now weigh a long list of trade-offs the panel identified.
The study is something that we find encouraging.
But the White House has a problem. Congress ordered this study in hopes of saving energy and cutting pollution, but it also prohibited the Department of Transportation from spending a penny to even consider changes in the mileage standard.
I know it's a catch-22. It doesn't sound like it makes much sense, but it is the law of the land, and we have to live under it until they remove it.
In early July, Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta wrote to Congress and asked that the prohibition be lifted so the administration could start to work as soon as the report was finished. Congress has not yet acted. Brit?
Jim, I'm a little puzzled about that, what you just reported about the prohibition. What exactly did Congress prohibit?
They prohibit them from spending any money to consider or propose any changes to the fuel efficiency standards. Obviously, this has been very controversial over the years because of people from states in which the automakers reside, Michigan one of them, of course, and that has always been a very tough sell. It's not only for the automakers, Brit, as we were talking about, the cost to consumers could be greater. You've got all sorts of considerations about family cars and how big they are, about acceleration. In fact, the panel said today, look, if you gave people this amount of money and said you're going to have to spend this much more money on a car, a lot of people wouldn't choose fuel efficiency. They would choose a better stereo, heated steering wheel, or lots of other things. So it's obviously going to be a very controversial move, whatever the White House does.
And if the White House wanted to raise the efficiency standards, couldn't do it, couldn't propose it, correct?
Well, at the moment, they cannot. Not until October can they even look at them and consider changes. Right now, they can't do a thing.
Great, Jim. Thanks very much. By nearly all accounts, President Bush's pick to head the FBI, Robert Mueller, is a no-nonsense reformer who embraces a challenge. But overcoming the problems at the beleaguered FBI is likely to be a daunting task for even the most seasoned official. Mueller faced the first round of questioning in his Senate confirmation process this day, and national correspondent Steve Centani has the story.
At his Senate confirmation hearing, Robert Mueller, the man chosen to head the FBI, acknowledged he'll have his work cut out for him.
We all know that the Bureau's remarkable legacy of service and accomplishment has been tarnished.
Tarnished by the violent clashes at Ruby Ridge and Waco, by problems with the FBI's crime lab, by the mishandling of the Wen Ho Lee and Richard Jewell cases. More recently, the Bureau discovered longtime agent Robert Hansen was spying for Russia and that weapons and computers were missing. And the Bureau suffered a black eye by failing to turn over documents in the case of Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh. Mueller says he'll insist on full accountability.
And we cannot tolerate efforts to cover up problems or to blame others.
And Mueller says the FBI can learn from the past.
We must learn from our mistakes, or we will be bound to repeat them.
Mueller says he'll move quickly to make appropriate management changes, upgrade the FBI's outdated computers, and crack down on cybercrime. Mueller is known as a tough prosecutor with a long track record at the Department of Justice. Appointed by the first President Bush, Mueller oversaw the investigation of the terrorist bombing of Pan Am Flight 103, as well as the prosecution of Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega. He was retained by President Clinton and appointed U.S. Attorney in San Francisco, then called back to Washington by George W. Bush to help run the Justice Department during the transition. Almost unanimously, senators had high praise for Mueller.
It's hard to imagine another nominee whose unquestioned experience, good character, and reputation would so perfectly match the requirements of this new position.
Mueller accepted the praise but stood his ground when pushed by senators. For instance, he bowed out of the debate over how long to keep FBI background checks on gun buyers.
I have some concern about the FBI being made a political football in a policy dispute.
Mueller is expected to be confirmed by the full Senate, possibly as early as this Friday. In Washington, Steve Centani, Fox News.
Coming up next, 3 months after Chandra Levy disappeared, are there any leads in the case? That story after a break.
Refinancing your mortgage may be easier than you think. Just log on to Ditech.com or call 1-800-71-FIX. Today's low fixed rate with 0 points is only 6.990%. With interest rates lower, now may be a great time to get cash or use the equity in your home to consolidate bills. It's smart money from Ditech.com. Apply online or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
Kids love Kraft singles because 2 out of 3 don't get the recommended amount of calcium, and singles are a good source. There's something about Kraft cheese.
Sir, at your next meeting...
Hold your horses. Let me finish this article.
The Weekly Standard. It takes you inside the Bush White House. The Weekly Standard has the inside scoop on who's in and what's next. Get insider coverage and analysis from leading conservative journalists Bill Kristol and Fred Barnes. Order the Weekly Standard now to take advantage of this special offer. Receive 24 issues of the Weekly Standard at a special low introductory rate of just $24.95. Call now and you'll receive the Weekly Standard for only 96 cents a week. That's more than 74% off the newsstand price. And with your paid subscription, you'll also receive a Weekly Standard tote bag for free. That's right. Order 24 issues of the Weekly Standard for just $24.95, and you'll receive the Weekly Standard tote bag for free. This is a limited time offer, so call now. The Weekly Standard. What those who lead, read.
13 weeks after Chandra Levy was last seen in Washington, D.C., police say they're preparing to scale back their efforts to find her. Investigators have put together a profile of her, indicating she spent the bulk of her time in the city, either at work or with Congressman Gary Condit. But they say they've exhausted their leads in the case. Senior correspondent Rita Cosby has more.
Police say this is the final week that recruits will be scouring wooded areas in Washington, D.C., a sign that after 3 months, they have no major leads in the Chandra Levy case. In this small park called Roosevelt Island on the Potomac River, they only found items they believe belong to homeless people.
There was a small knife that was recovered, and there was also a pair of men's pants wrapped up in plastic. I don't think there was anything significant.
Levy's parents are disappointed that the search is fading and feel there may still be avenues for police to investigate.
Well, I'd like to see them look at everything, you know. I don't know if they have. Certainly, doing things 12 weeks later, I'm not sure you can get the same facts you would have gotten early on.
Law enforcement sources tell Fox News the FBI wants to review all the interviews D.C. police have conducted, especially those with convicted sex offenders, as well as Levy's neighbors, acquaintances of hers at the health club, and co-workers, some of whom have yet to speak to authorities. Sources say police still have lingering questions surrounding Congressman Gary Condit, and an unexplained phone call placed from Mrs. Condit's home to the congressman's Washington apartment. Publicly, police say they have no evidence of Mrs. Condit speaking to anyone on the phone at the time in question. For now, police are cautious as to whether they'd interview the Condits again.
I think the information that we've gathered is sufficient at this point. We never rule out that we may talk to someone else again, but we really have to remember neither the congressman nor his wife is a suspect in this case. We simply don't know what happened to her.
Meantime, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee is critical of D.C. police and Condit's political career.
His political career, as a practical matter, I assume is gone. As a former prosecutor, I think I'd be asking the police, why'd you take 5 or 6 weeks to do some of the things you should have done to begin with?
And just a short time ago, we received some video of an altercation that took place outside of Congressman Gary Condit's apartment here in Washington. His senior aide, Mike Dayton, says that the congressman was shoved by an Associated Press still photographer. And he also filed a report with the police. He said that from here on out, there needs to be some ground rules established on how closely the press can follow the congressman, especially now that the story has dragged on for 3 months. Brit, back to you.
All right, Rita, thanks very much. Newly freed American University researcher Gao Zhan says she thinks she was captured in China because Beijing wants to learn more about the activities of Chinese scholars overseas. After moving to the U.S., Gao became a Christian and wrote about the opportunities for women in Taiwan. Then last February, on a trip to China, she and her husband and 5-year-old son were separated and all taken into custody. Her husband and son were released, but she was in Chinese custody until last week. Gao spoke with Fox News about her ordeal, and White House correspondent Wendell Goler has the story.
After 4 days of freedom, American University professor Gao Zhan thought back on nearly half a year's detention in China.
For the first 7 weeks, the evenings were filled with interrogations.
For the first month, her husband, Zhui Donghua, and their 5-year-old son, Andrew, were in custody, too.
I think the main purpose for them to take Andrew is to use him as a hostage.
Gao says she never cried in front of her jailers, but alone at night, the tears flowed.
In myself, when I was thinking about my son and my husband and my future.
Gao was arrested for giving copies of Chinese speeches, book excerpts, and magazine articles about Taiwan to fellow academic Li Xiaomen. Both were convicted of spying.
So it's very arbitrary. It's in their power to decide which kind of material is state secret and which is not.
Gao and her family were reunited Thursday after the Chinese suspended her 10-year prison term.
I can breathe freely and now speak freely.
Both Gao and Li Xiaomen were freed just before Secretary of State Colin Powell arrived in Beijing for talks that seemed to herald better U.S.-Chinese relations. Powell says the Chinese are no longer aggressively tailing U.S. surveillance planes like the EP-3 that collided with a fighter jet last April. Administration officials say the Chinese are more willing to talk about sensitive subjects like their sale of missile technology to countries we feel shouldn't have it, and about human rights. But despite China's willingness to talk about human rights, Gao and Zhui are concerned for their parents who are still in China, and for Li Xiaoman, who has returned to Hong Kong to teach. Gao remembers how quickly she went from being an accused spy to a convicted one.
About 2 hours, and 40 minutes of adjournment, and about 5 minutes of announcement of a sentencing.
Some editorial writers say Gao's conviction was bogus and the U.S. ought to do more than just say thank you to China. But Gao says she'd like to thank the president for pressing Beijing, and she'd like to do it in person. At the White House, Wendell Goler, Fox News.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill want to know why the military has issued government credit cards to 1.8 million personnel who consequently racked up $9 billion worth of debt on the taxpayer's tab. And some of the charges were for items such as nightclub bills, clothes, and DVD players. Fox News correspondent James Rosen has details.
Congressional investigators painted the Pentagon Monday as a place where charge is not a battle cry, but the easiest way to misspend taxpayer money and get away with it.
The Department of Defense has created an army of spenders. With the Department of Defense credit card in hand, they have almost unlimited authority to spend money. There are no controls, no responsibilities, no accountability.
Lawmakers cited more than 500 cases of Pentagon credit card fraud in the last 2 years, with one bank swallowing $59 million in bad debt, racked up by service personnel plunking down plastic on everything from pizza to Palm Pilots.
We have used Palm Pilots just like most folks in business do to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the worker.
But it seems to me you've got to make some tough judgments.
Yes, sir. And I'm going to look into that.
These are little toys for a lot of people, and gee, you know, I'm at such and such a level, and look, I've got a Palm Pilot.
In their defense officials contrasted their records on credit card fraud with the private sector's.
The commercial benchmark for vendor fraud and compromised card activity is 0.06% to 0.09% of the total dollar value spent. The Department of the Navy's rate is less than half of the commercial benchmark.
One witness claimed military personnel are trained to monitor credit card abuse, but added,
"We're not sure that the things that people are learning are being put into effect."
And another witness provoked laughter, explaining away a purchase.
She's a good employee, Mr. Chairman. She probably made an honest mistake and happened to be at Nordstrom's and purchased that bag, and I think she'll do better next time.
I won't comment on that.
On the whole, government accountants say the credit card program actually saves Uncle Sam more than $1 billion a year by cutting red tape. But 2 more extensive investigations of Defense Department spending due this fall promise to make the Pentagon more fully account for its own runaway credit card accounts. In Washington, James Rosen, Fox News.
Coming up next, could the House produce a patient's Bill of Rights the president is willing to sign? We'll talk to the sponsor of one such potential measure, Republican Congressman Ernie Fletcher of Kentucky. That's next.
It's not the government's money. Americans, they need their money back.
Tax cut, but how about a responsible tax cut?
Do you need to learn how to operate a computer? Hi, I'm John Scher, CEO and founder of Video Professor. Seems like everywhere I go these days, somebody's recognizing me as the Video Professor. Well, that's because we've been teaching people how to run computers for over 14 years now. You know, our product is quick and it's easy to learn with, and you can try it for free. You know, over the years, millions of people have learned how to operate their computer using our product. We get happy letters every day from people thanking us. Violet from Alabama writes, "Your lesson make using the program seem so simple that even I can use it." Janet from California writes, "Your tutorials have opened up the world of computers to me at last. But the most rewarding thing for me is having people stop me on the street and telling me how easy it was to learn with our product. They had tried expensive classes, they tried big, thick manuals, they couldn't get it. If you just want to learn how to run a computer once and for all, save yourself a lot of time and energy, try our product. Let me show you how simple this is. You put this CD in your CD tray, your lesson will come up. The lesson plays right on your computer. It works just like a VCR. You have a play button, pause, rewind, fast forward. Just follow the step-by-step instructions. You know, I'm so confident my product will work for you, I'm going to send it to you absolutely free. It's regularly a $59.95 value. You pay a small shipping and handling. The reason I'm going to do it is because I know that once you try our product, you'll come back to us for all your computer learning needs. And if this doesn't teach you how to run that computer, I'll even refund your shipping and handling. So what do you got to lose? Try my product.
I felt so good. I mean, phew, what a relief. I can understand this after all.
Choose from lessons on Windows, the Internet, Word, Excel, Quicken, and many others. To get your free computer learning CD, you must call now. Call 1-800-243-2149.
The easiest, lowest cost way to order pay-per-view. Keep a phone line connected to your receiver. Tune in to pay-per-view channels 455 through 525. Choose your show. Hit select. Confirm your order. Enjoy. Tonight, order Dish On Demand pay-per-view with your Dish Network remote.
There's a simpler way to save for the things you want. The Orange Savings Account from ING Direct. Everyone gets the same high 4.4% rate. With no minimums, no fees, and without changing banks. It's the simple way to make the most of your money. Call 1-800-ING Direct for great rates on savings, loans, and mortgages. 1-800-ING Direct.
President Bush might not like it, and the public may or may not care much about it, but a patient's Bill of Rights has become the issue of the day here inside the Beltway, and the White House began the week with some work to do to head off a defeat in the House of Representatives. The president has been unable to make a deal with sponsors of the so-called Norwood-Dingle bill that looks very much like a Senate-passed bill he says he'll veto. So he's also working to round up votes for an alternative sponsored by Republican Congressman Ernie Fletcher of Kentucky, which is said to be close to having enough votes. For the latest on all this, Congressman Fletcher himself joins me now from outside the Capitol. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, Brit.
Now, the president was said as recently as Sunday by Tommy Thompson, the HHS secretary, to be within 6 to 10 votes of enough to pass your legislation. What's he been doing today?
Well, he's met with a couple of groups. One, he met with Charlie Norwood. You know, he's still trying to work out a deal, and we've been, met with him for some time, and I know the president has met with him, but so far they've been, unwilling to compromise at all, even though we've come quite a ways.
What is the main sticking point remaining between the president and Congressman Norwood and his group?
The main sticking point is the fact that they want pretty much unlimited liability. We have very focused liability. We do allow individuals to go to state court if the plan doesn't follow the panel of expert physicians, but most of it is liability.
Panel of expert physicians being the appeals process that you go through. If your HMO lets you down, you feel, you go through them. If that doesn't work out, you can then sue in state court or federal court, correct?
That's correct, and we haven't seemed to be able to budge them at all. And one of the problems is that Mr. Norwood always has to go back to the Democrats, and I think, Britt, personally, they would rather have an issue for 2002 than really get a good patient Bill of Rights, because we've compromised substantially with them, and they don't seem to have moved any at all.
All right. Now, you mentioned also that he met with members of the New Jersey delegation. So far as you know, what came out of that?
Well, I think it's a continued dialogue. I think we're getting closer together. That delegation certainly has some serious concerns about their state law, and if we can make sure that we don't interfere with their state law, I think they'll come along fairly well.
And how many votes would you pick up from that?
Well, that would probably give us about 5 votes, which may really bring us over the top, because along with them would come some other folks. So it's very close.
So this but this would be a further compromise by the president and by your side, right? It would have to mean that the legislation would have an exemption from some of its requirements for states like New Jersey that might have different litigation provisions?
Well, I think it depends on how we write it. Our really intent all along was not to interfere, and actually on all the other provisions we supersede state law a lot less. On the liability portion, we'd have to look and see what we can do to make sure that their concerns are met. And if we could do that, I think then we'd be able to move this bill. Whether we use, the Norwood bill as the base, an amendment, or whether we use my bill, the most important thing is to get a piece of legislation here for the patients of America.
Now, you suggested that Charlie Norwood, who is, of course, a Republican from Georgia, the former dentist, he does have John Dingell, a Democrat of Michigan, as a co-sponsor, and others. I know that Senator Edwards, a former trial lawyer from North Carolina, is a player in all this. Which members on the Democratic side do you believe or allege are the ones that won't go along with a compromise?
Well, I think you mentioned some of them. You know, Senator Kennedy, Senator Edwards. I'm not sure Mr. Dingell and Mr. Gephardt want any kind of compromise. That they would much rather have an issue in 2002. They would rather be in the majority, and I think they will sacrifice the health of the American people to do that. You know, their legislation.
Well, wait, that's a little bit strong. I mean, isn't it, Congressman, fair to believe that they think that their way of doing this is genuinely better for patients?
Well, let me say this: consensus across the board will leave 2 to 9 million uninsured with their piece of legislation. These are going to be the most vulnerable, low income, minorities. I don't say that directly that's their intent, but I'm saying that they're so focused on making sure that's an issue, some of them, that they're not willing to look and sit down and look at a compromise. And that's really what I'm saying here. And I think that's been borne out in the fact that we've not been able to reach a compromise, even though we've moved substantially in their direction.
Now, you mentioned that New Jersey delegation members could put you almost over the top or over the top. Has there been movement from the situation on Sunday, which was described as 6 to 10 votes short?
I think we've had some movement there. It's going to depend on, you know, what happens this week. We're scheduling the vote, it looks like, around Thursday. That could always slip, Britt, but it depends what happens and how the rule is constructed.
The rule being, of course, the terms under which the measure would be considered, right?
That's right.
What amendments would be in order and what order they'd come in, correct?
Correct. Some folks think it might be better to take the Gansky bill, the Gansky-Dingell bill, and amend that. Others may see, using mine as a substitute. And we've always, and I'm certainly open to anything that would make sure we get a good bill out of the House, because I think that's more important than, whose name's on it, Britt. But.
All right. Congressman Fletcher, it's nice of you to join us. We may ask you to keep us updated as the week wears on.
Well, thank you, Britt. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for coming in. We have to take a quick break here for other headlines. When we return, find out why New York City police mean it when they say no tolerance. The Grapevine is next.
Kids love Kraft singles because 2 out of 3 don't get the recommended amount of calcium, and singles are a good source. There's something about Kraft cheese. Let's get set.
Wouldn't it be great to fly the family to Orlando and go on a theme park-a-thon? You can go to Priceline.com for airfare and a hotel room, then take all the dough you saved and visit Movie Studio Land and see family-friendly death-defying stunts, people in Animal Suit Land, and watch performing plushies, and friendly marine creature land, and witness the wonders of the briny deep. And then, if the super smart dolphins ask you how you did so much and spent so little, you'd say it's called the wonderful world of discount.
You are always growing, learning, discovering, and nothing should stop you, especially not your health. That's why Liberty was created. Liberty is a leader in home delivery of diabetes testing supplies and respiratory medications. They help you manage your health. Liberty delivers what you need when you need it right to your front door, and delivery is free. All the top brand names that you know and trust. If you're on Medicare and suffer from diabetes or a chronic respiratory disorder, call Liberty. They work directly with Medicare and have specialists available day and night to answer your questions. A chronic health condition can be a lot to manage, but it doesn't have to define who you are. By taking care of the details, Liberty lets you take care of being yourself, and life gets easier. You are stronger than you think. You have power. You have freedom. You have Liberty. Call 1-800-340-3293 for free information.
Tonight, the 3-month-long search continues, and this is your #1 source for coverage, The Fox Report with Shepard Smith. Then,
the people are shallow. The American public is shallow.
Is he going off the deep end? Dive into political incorrectness with Bill Maher on The O'Reilly Factor. It's the most powerful primetime lineup in sight, only on the Fox News Channel.
Hi, I'm Edie Donahue. Tomorrow on Fox and Friends, how long can Gary Condit rely on support from fellow Democrats? Are the tides turning? We'll take a look. 7 a.m. Eastern. Hello, everybody. I'm Lori Dew. Oklahoma City bombing co-conspirator Terry Nichols may face another trial. An Oklahoma state prosecutor has been meeting with survivors of the bombing today to determine if he should stand trial for murder. A former district attorney charged him with 160 counts of first-degree murder. Nichols is already serving a life sentence for being convicted in a federal trial for the deaths of 8 federal agents after the bombing in 1995. Another member of the Kennedy family may be making a bid for public office. William Kennedy Smith is considering running for a congressional seat in Illinois. The Chicago doctor was acquitted of rape charges 10 years ago. New regulations for using medical marijuana went into effect north of the border in Canada today. The Canadian government has instituted the first program in the world to include government-approved and paid-for pot. The marijuana can be obtained by people who suffer from terminal illness or who have chronic conditions like arthritis. And finally, for this little pooch, a dog's life is a good life. Jack was accidentally taken hostage when his owner's truck was stolen. He was later found wandering around the Kansas Speedway. He made up for it, though, yesterday by competing in and winning the Wiener Dog Nationals. Congratulations. The Fox Report with Shepard Smith is coming up, as always, at the top of the hour. But now, more special report with Brit Hume. Stay tuned.
And now the most intriguing 2 minutes in television, the latest from the political grapevine. Witnesses say a fistfight nearly broke out on the House floor last week between Majority Whip Tom DeLay and a Democratic aide named Scott Lilly, who is said to have used the F word in loudly denouncing a group of Republican staff members, including one female. Roll call reports that DeLay then grabbed Lilly by the back of his jacket and said, quote, "Don't you come over here and use foul language with my staff." Lilly replied, quote, "You're not intimidating me, DeLay," but later apologized. He told Roll Call, quote, "I probably used a word or two that I shouldn't have." California Governor Gray Davis appears to have been caught in a series of untruths in his accusations that Texas power companies, which he called the biggest snakes on earth, had gouged his state when it needed to buy power on the spot market this year. An article in the Houston Chronicle says that newly released public records show that such companies, Texas companies, actually charged California utilities less than the state's publicly owned utilities were charging. For the first 3 months of the year, the article says California's own utilities were selling their excess power for $344 per megawatt, while the Texas companies were charging only $250. The article, by 2 Cato Institute researchers, said Davis knew this all the time. The senior Justice Department official whose opposition played a major part in Janet Reno's refusal to appoint an independent counsel to investigate the Clinton fundraising scandals has been reassigned, demoted. Lee Radick, who has been head of the department's public integrity section, will become a senior counsel in the asset forfeiture and money laundering section. Radick's handling of the fundraising case at one point led FBI Director Louis Freeh to urge him to recuse himself from the case. The decision to reassign him was made by Michael Chertoff, the new head of the criminal division, who also happens to have been chief counsel of the Senate committee that investigated the Clinton fundraising case. And finally, Rudy Giuliani may be leaving office, but New York City cops are as tough as ever. When 3-year-old Harry Brandt Shaw had to go to the bathroom in Battery Park the other day, he found a tree and relieved himself. The result was a $50 ticket, promptly issued by an alert parks officer. Because of his age, the summons was given to the young fellow's nanny. A grapevine item last Friday, in fact, noted that Army Specialist Richard Lovett, who was featured in an Army of One ad, has dropped out of the grueling Special Forces training course for, quote, personal and professional reasons. The Army points out that he was one of 534 soldiers who voluntarily withdrew from the 2-year course, and that Lovett wanted to be better prepared before he applies again, likely later this year. He is still a combat engineer, and the ads, which are for Army recruiting in general, are still in use. As Congress heads into the final legislative stretch before taking a month off for summer recess, leaders of both parties are looking ahead to the traditional budget battle in the fall, and they're trying to determine what measures actually have a chance of passage this week. Fox News' Brian Wilson joins us now live with the details. Hi, Brian.
Hey, well, Britt, there could be a lot on the plate this week, but there actually is going to be a very limited number of things that can be accomplished. In the Senate, no final resolution on the Mexican trucking issue, though the Senate telegraphed in a procedural vote last week that it wants Mexican trucks entering this country to be held to very high safety standards, standards that are even higher than those required of Canadian trucks entering this country. However, a good portion of this week in the Senate will be spent arguing over the relative merits of the Department of Agriculture's dairy programs, and that frustrates the Senate's top Republican, Trent Lott.
There are about 4 issues that we could try to do this week, plus the nominations, but all of them are tied up because they're related to the other bill or because there are objections to things like the dairy compact. So it's going to be a complicated week.
Now, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle says to some degrees on the ag matter, the dairy matter, his hands were tied. He had to move forward, and he adds,
I think it's too early to declare gridlock. I'd like to think that we can continue to put pressure on to get the job done.
Now, in the House of Representatives, the big question is, will they take up and do anything with the Patients' Bill of Rights? You've spent a great deal of time talking about that, Brett. I won't rehash all of that except to say the White House asked for the bill to be taken down last week because the bill that was emerging they didn't like. There's still 6 to 10 votes short of a bill that they could accept. Also in the House, bills on banning human cloning to be considered this week, and key votes on the president's energy policy. Watch for a floor vote, especially on that controversial issue of drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Britt?
Brian, thanks very much for that wrap-up. The man who has been called the nation's first black president has received a welcome worthy of a rock star in the place known as the epicenter of black culture. Bill Clinton came to Harlem this day in what is seemingly the first red carpet welcome for any former president to his new office. Senior correspondent Eric Shawn has details.
A celebration and a welcome home. Former President Bill Clinton showed up for his first day of work in Harlem and was greeted with a rousing rally.
Welcoming William Jefferson Clinton. How about that? I love it.
He moved into his new office in the heart of the largest African-American community in the country.
There's nobody that was kicking Bill Clinton around that didn't start off on kicking us around.
His appearance reminiscent of a spirited campaign stop, as nearly 1,000 turned out to greet their new prominent neighbor.
Now I feel like I'm home. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Despite his enthusiasm, Harlem was the former president's second choice for office space. Shamed out of renting that high-priced high-rise office next to Carnegie Hall in Midtown at a price of $800,000, he settled on 125th Street, for which taxpayers will shell out about $350 grand a year. Still, the most expensive office space for a former president. He alluded to his troubled past, thanking those here for supporting him during his impeachment.
You were there on the darkest days and the best days, and I want you to know I want to be a good neighbor in Harlem.
Mrs. Clinton could not attend because her mother was undergoing surgery. The former president even sang the song Stand By Me, but not everyone did. A small but vocal group from the new Black Panther Party loudly protested his presence.
Keep Harlem black! Keep Harlem strong! Keep Harlem strong!
But most of his new neighbors seemed to be thrilled.
I think he was an excellent president, and I'm glad he's here. We'll make Harlem Clinton country.
The former president's first mission from this building will be to try and raise money to help stop the global spread of AIDS. His new office may not be oval, but as one Clinton confidant put it, at least he's out of the den in Chappaqua. In Harlem, Eric Shawn, Fox News.
After the 2000 election dispute, former Presidents Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford teamed up with the University of Virginia to study election reform. Their report is being released Tuesday at the White House, and sources who have seen it say the recommendations include turning Election Day into a federal holiday and establishing statewide systems for voter registration. It is also said to call for allowing voters who were challenged by poll workers to cast votes anyway, with the validity of those votes to be determined later. Don't change the channel, everybody. The Fox All-Stars are up next.
Refinancing your mortgage may be easier than you think. Just log on to ditech.com or call 1-800-71-FIX. Today's low fixed rate with 0 points is only 6.990%. With interest rates lower, now may be a great time to get cash or use the equity in your home to consolidate bills. It's smart money from ditech.com. Apply online or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's that time of year again. They're going back! It's back to school time at Staples. Over 7,000 supplies at guaranteed low prices. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Staples. Yeah, we've got that.
Sir. Can I please have some of that new, I can't believe it's not butter, sweet cream and calcium?
I'm afraid we only serve that in the Mega Ultra Platinum First Class.
Presenting new I Can't Believe It's Not Butter, Sweet Cream and Calcium, with real sweet cream for a rich, creamy taste. New I Can't Believe It's Not Butter, Sweet Cream and Calcium, outrageously great taste.
Pasta! Sì, rozzine. Molto bene, Uncle Benne. È pronto, Antonio. Good, huh?
New Uncle Ben's Pasta Bowls. Hospice provides the end-of-life care you and your loved ones want and need. It's available to everyone. Hospice care. Comfort and compassion when it's needed most.
Some insights now from Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard, joined by Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and from the White House North Lawn, Mara's old spot, our own Jim Angle, senior White House correspondent of Fox News. Jim, the White House has just issued a statement on this cloning issue, which is before Congress?
That's right, Brett. They've issued a statement saying what they will and will not support on an anti-cloning bill. There is an amendment that would narrow that. The cloning legislation that's up would exclude cloning both with an aim of cloning a person and also with an aim of cloning embryos. An amendment would pull out the embryos part of it, and in the language the White House put out this afternoon, calling it an administration statement of policy, it seems to indicate one of the things that Mr. Bush will not allow federal funding for when he comes to his question about stem cell research. It says here that the administration would strongly oppose any substitute amendment and so forth, which would permit human embryos to be created and developed solely for research purposes. So at least the president seems to have ruled out that one thing. It's not something we expected him to embrace anyway, but it does give you some indication of where he's headed, Britt. And there is one other point this afternoon, that is that Laura Bush has said in an interview that they're talked about the life-saving potential of stem cells from embryos, and said that a lot of these embryos at fertility clinics would be destroyed anyway or disposed of anyway. So I think that makes this decision even more difficult, she said.
All right, so Bill, you've followed this issue very closely. What does this signify, what the White House has said?
Well, the president supports Congressman Weldon's bill, which would ban all human cloning, and opposes Congressman Greenwood's bill, which would allow the cloning of embryos, which would then be destroyed for research purposes. So the president's position is you cannot create an embryo, either by cloning or I think he'll say in other ways, for the purpose of destroying it.
Now,
that would allow him to say, however, that already existing embryos in vitro fertilization clinics, some of which would be destroyed in any case, if he wants to, he could say on those I might allow the research to
Mara,
proceed.
what would that leave? Would that leave in this country a limited pool of stem cells already created and block federal funding to create any new ones? Is that right?
If he went one step further, there are three steps. One, okay, he doesn't want to clone embryos for research purposes. He could say all of the embryos that are going to be discarded anyway that are in fertility clinics, those are fair game for stem cell research. That's a lot of embryos. Those are possibly 100,000. Then there's the group that you're talking about, stem cells that have already been removed. There are about 10 or 12 cell lines, that's what they're called, 10 or 12 of them that already exist, he could restrict it to that. That means no more can be extracted with federal funds, but you can do the research on the ones that have been extracted already.
Jim, do you sense that what's happening here is that the president is moving toward a kind of compromise position here on this that would allow some stem cell research to go forward, but only in a very limited way? Is that where we are?
Well, that's the sense you get, Brett, but this is a very personal decision for the president. He has described it, especially on his European trip right after he talked to the Pope, he described it in very even-handed terms, talking with equal weight about the life-saving potential of this, as well as the moral implications. He does seem to be ruling out the extremes, ruling out cloning embryos simply for the purpose of taking stem cells and then destroying them. Obviously, he was not going to go for using stem cells from aborted fetuses. So he seems to be eliminating the things
absolute
that are
positions on both ends.
Absolute positions on both ends, leaving the middle ground, the gray area, as he tries to find his way in what he's admitted is a very difficult position.
Now, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the Catholic Church and conservative Catholics and pro-life groups are opposed to that middle ground. They say there should be no research on stem cells derived from embryos, no matter how you got them. But I think it's interesting that Laura Bush said what she said. This is a first lady who never speaks about policy, ever. And here she spoke favorably, it sounds like, about embryos that are derived, stem cells that are derived from embryos that are already slated for destruction, that is, the leftover ones in fertility clinics. I'm not saying she speaks for her husband, but it is a rare occurrence, and she spoke out on something very controversial.
Oh, and I think from a political point of view, the president wants to oppose cloning, and he wants to win a victory tomorrow. On cloning, it's not a trivial victory. You know,
he thought to have the votes?
He is thought to have the votes to beat back the Greenwood bill and then pass the Weldon bill with some bipartisan support. I think he can say, look, we are concerned about these ethical issues. We are not going to let just slide down the slope to the brave new world. Now, on the issue of this much more difficult issue where there are competing considerations, as Mara says, there I think he might look for a compromise on stem cells. He might not, but I think it's much to his advantage to have cloning come up first and be able to say, I am taking a serious moral position on cloning.
Does that insulate him to some extent, or or at least give him a little protection from criticisms that he's gone soft on this whole package of issues?
I think a little, and I think if he then sort of steps forward and articulates a point of view which takes seriously the moral concerns about genetic engineering and the creation of new, the manufacture of human beings and eugenics and all that sort of thing, I think it gives him a little room, perhaps, on the more difficult issue of what do you do with these already existing embryos, some of which would already be destroyed. I mean, I think you can make a case that he shouldn't even do that, but I could see how he and Mrs. Bush, if they wanted to, could make a serious moral distinction there.
It's going to be tough. He's let this go on so long that the people who are against this are pretty well dug in, and they've been very, very clear that there should be no research at all. I think it's going to be difficult.
Jim, when do you expect the decision?
Well, it's hard to say. You would think he might do it before he goes to Texas, but I think that he believes that letting this go on a long time has actually helped him, because it's helped the public wrestle with the same issues he's wrestling with. He said on his European trip this was unusually deliberative for his administration, meaning that he has taken more time than he ordinarily would have. He's generally regarded as a fairly decisive man. On this one, he seems to be struggling.
All right, Jim, thanks very much. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Bill Clinton in Harlem. If he's in Harlem now, where will he be next? We'll talk about that in a moment. Stay tuned.
Morning, guys.
Hi. Hey. Morning.
Like to see how your cereals stack up to total?
Sure.
To get the iron in 1 bowl of total, you'll have to eat 2 bowls of cornflakes. For folic acid, try 4 bowls.
That's a really big spoon.
Want zinc? 10 bowls for you.
What's so funny? Nothing.
Nice bowl.
Total has 100% of 11 vitamins and minerals in just 1 bowl.
We'll take the total, sir, and give Junior the check. What?
Total Raisin Bran, Total Cornflakes. 1 bowl, 100%.
There's a way to remove dust and not just move it around. Swiffer cloths have lift and lock pockets to help attract and trap dust and dirt with the swipe of a hand. The Swiffer system cleans even hard-to-reach places. And when you're done, just throw the dust away. When Swiffer's the one, consider it done.
Michael Jordan is an idol of mine. Mickey Mantle was an idol of mine. Nolan Ryan was an idol of mine. Now, on a daily basis, I'm able to hold their rookie cards. Now, on a daily basis, I'm able to hold a game-used bat that was once used by Mark McGuire. It's a pretty cool job. Buy a vintage card because you had it as a child, and when you moved out of your house, your mom and dad threw it away. Buy it because it means something to you.
Shop at home, not your ordinary shopping channel.
A little short on entertainment? How would you like a non-stop joyride?
I'll take it.
How about guaranteed exhilaration?
I'll take it.
Showtime Unlimited gives you 200 exclusive movies every month, guaranteed. 50 very original shows, guaranteed. 10 channels, just $10.99.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
You'll get it. You'll get it. Call now for the best value on Dish Network.
I'll take it.
Guaranteed.
I'll tell you what.
What?
I'll take it.
Are you one of the millions of American males who would like increased sexual energy? If you've been considering Viagra as a solution, consider something different. All-natural Enerx. Clinical studies show various ingredients of Enerx enhance sexual energy, increasing desire, performance, and satisfaction. Enerx is all-natural with no side effects. With Enerx, you'll feel the increased energy within minutes and with no chemicals. We're so sure you and your mate will be completely satisfied. We'll offer you a 30-day, no questions asked, full refund. Enerx stimulates sexual energy by expanding the blood vessels, causing increased blood flow to specific areas of the body. Unleash the power of Enerx now.
Call 1-800-367-4051 toll-free, and it will be delivered discreetly to your home. Get results using the safe, all-natural alternative, Enerx.
I want to make sure that I'm a good neighbor in Harlem. I'm glad the property values are going up, but I don't want the small business people to be run out because I'm coming in.
He got a rousing reception. And that event in Harlem with a band playing and people singing and a big crowd, man's moving into an office after all, you got to commemorate the moment, is thought to be something of a, well, a new coming out for our former president. And the question is, does this spell good times ahead for him, for Mrs. Clinton, trouble for George W. Bush? What, Mara?
Well, good times for Bill Clinton. I think we can settle on that. I don't know about trouble. Because he's going to be a happy guy. He's going to be out there. He's going to be soaking up all the adulation, which he got plenty of in Harlem. And I think there certainly are some dangerous waters for him to avoid, like commenting on any current political debate that's before the president and Congress. He's giving some speeches because I think the minute he does, he's going to be criticized for wanting to still be president, inserting himself in a way that ex-presidents don't usually do. Now, the speeches he's giving this week, race relations, AIDS, I think those are pretty safe topics for him. But that was an amazing performance today. You know, he's back, and he talked about the one controversial thing about him coming. It wasn't a big controversy, but that some small business owners think rents are going up. They're not going up because of Bill Clinton. They're going up because Harlem is enjoying a renaissance, and there's Starbucks and the Gap and the Disney store up there now, too. But he will always be in touch with people's feelings, and he's a great performer.
Reminded me of when Fred Barnes and I started the Weekly Standard, you know, just about a mile uptown from here, and thousands of people in the streets shouting, you know, choir. Yeah, it was very similar,
Well, yeah,
really.
what's going to be the runner-up? Bill Clinton gets his first cup of coffee in Harlem. Big parade. Bill Clinton goes out for his first hamburger in Harlem. You know, brass band. I mean...
How about it, Angle? You covered the guy. What do you expect? Is his being back on the scene, it was a big help to this president. The manner in which this former president left office and the stuff he took with him, or some of it anyway, and the pardons and all of that.
Man, the
is it
cost
possible,
of the first
is all
office,
that forgotten, really, or what?
Well, I don't think it's all forgotten. I mean, I would disagree with Mara just a bit. I think it's only a matter of time until he will not be able to bite his lip and say something critical about the Bush administration or a Bush policy. I just don't think he can resist that temptation. He's been very good at, during the campaign, he didn't get into it too much, but he had a couple of really nasty but humorous remarks about Bush. And I think he's likely to get back into that fairly soon. Whether or not he's going to get into trouble from here on out, who knows? He has an equal penchant for getting into lots of trouble and also for doing things that get him the adulation of the crowds. Raising money for the Worldwide AIDS Fund, I mean, that's an easy one. That is non-controversial. It's something he can do. and one of the few things that he probably agrees with George W. Bush on.
But, you know, as long as George W. Bush keeps as low a profile as he is, Bill Clinton might benefit from that. You know, if the public still has some kind of nostalgia for a larger-than-life president and a really compelling, flamboyant figure, that might help him.
But the one person who wasn't there, of course, was Mrs. Clinton. Her mother was having an operation, but presumably Bill Clinton could have moved back a day, or the operation could have been moved a day. Maybe she didn't want to be there with her husband, but I think that's a problem for Mrs. Clinton. She is the senator from that state. She has to be an independent actor on the scene. And I think to the degree that he steps out and starts criticizing Bush on some public policy issue, then the question immediately goes to Mrs. Clinton. Well, do you agree with your husband? Are you simply following in your husband's footsteps? He really needs to stand back for her sake. I mean, she is doing well. I think she's popular in New York. She's, possible vice presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket in 2004. If she's reelected in 2006 as a senator, she's an obvious presidential possibility in 2008. He's got to really ask himself, doesn't he owe her the chance to be the Clinton who speaks from New York?
Realistically, though, tomorrow he will go to his office, if he does go tomorrow. There will be no band, there will be no celebration, there'll be no platform, there'll be no microphones. So day in, day out, what does he do?
Well, it depends. Now, there have been reports of him going out to eat in Harlem when he was looking for office space, and he stood in the window of the restaurant, and all of a sudden there were, hundreds of people, on the sidewalk. But day after day, maybe the thrill wears off. He raises money for Democrats. He gets less and less press attention. Maybe that's the moment that Jimmy's speaking about. That's the moment of greatest peril for him, when he'll feel the cameras shifting and he'll need to get it back.
Yeah. The question is, are there interns there in the office in Harlem? Oh, I know, I shouldn't have gone there. This is why he should stay away.
All right, you get the last word on that, Bill. And that is all the time we have for the panel. Thanks to Bill, thanks to Mara, and thanks to Jim. Stay tuned for a look at a Washington official who could use some kind words.
Take that laxative and you miss the bus. Huh? It contains harsh stimulants. Says on the label it could cause abdominal discomfort and cramps.
Sounds worse than constipation.
Oh, you bet. But Phillips is different. It's gentle and stimulant-free, so you don't have to feel worse before you feel better.
That's great. Excuse me? I said the bus is late.
Phillips, the comfortable way.
When I got my cholesterol checked, it was high. Too high. So Liz and I got very careful about what we were eating. We even joined a gym. But my doctor found my cholesterol was still too high.
He's doing everything you asked. Now what?
That's when my doctor added Lipitor.
Lipitor is the #1 prescribed medication for lowering cholesterol. In clinical studies, Lipitor with diet lowered bad cholesterol 39 to 60%, total cholesterol 29 to 45%, triglycerides 19 to 37%. Once-a-day Lipitor is not for everyone, including people with liver disease or possible liver problems, women who are nursing, pregnant, or may become pregnant. Blood tests are needed to check for liver problems. Tell your doctor about muscle pain or weakness, as they may be signs of serious side effects. Call 1-888-LIPITOR.
Look at those numbers. They're way down.
Lipitor did it.
Ask your doctor what Lipitor can do for you. Lipitor, the lower numbers you're looking for.
Good thing kids love Kraft singles, because 2 out of 3 don't get the recommended amount of calcium. And singles are a good source. There's something about Kraft cheese.
Fox News Live. All day, breaking news.
This is a Fox News alert. Some of the first pictures
from the people viewers trust.
In what promises to be a landmark case.
Updates and reports whenever news happens. Wherever news happens. The most powerful name in news. Fox News Channel.
The search for Chandra. You found your #1 source for the latest findings. Then the DC disser strikes again. Bill Maher lets her rip. Tonight, only on the Fox News Channel.
Finally, the D.C. Police Department, which remains baffled in the Chandra Levy case, has come in for its share of criticism lately, and Chief Charles Ramsey was in the audience when President Bush spoke to the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement. Did the president add to the criticism? No way.
You always got to say something nice about the police chief and the community in which you live. Just in case. My case, just in case the limo driver drives a little too fast.
And that's special report for this time. Please come again next time. And in the meantime, stay tuned for news. Fair and balanced, as always.